Hello, everyone. So we all know when you own your own house, you own your own house, and the government really shouldn't have a right to tell you what to do in your own house, etc. But you pretty much they don't, because you pretty much don't own your house. Pretty much, what I'm trying to say is, you have to pay a property tax in this state in Ireland since 2013, and the argument then was that local authorities, particularly councils, local councils, didn't have the money because the country obviously was just after having a major recession in 2008 and there was no money pretty much. And the government was like, we could raise an extra few bob if we charge people for the property they already own. Imagine you pay off a big, huge mortgage, you work all your life to pay it off, you pay off the banks, etc. And then all of a sudden the government comes around and say, even though it's only about maybe 100, 200 in some cases a year, it's still the principle. In some cases, it's a lot more for some people. Depends on how much property you have, and depends on the size, of course. But what I'm trying to say, it is really pretty much theft because you own your own property, and the state shouldn't really be charging you more for you to own your property. And pretty much, in a way, too, the state says unless you pay your property tax, you don't have the right to own your own property. And it all fits into this agenda we see in the modern world now that you own nothing and be happy. And then obviously we see the price of rent, etc., etc., endless, and pretty much the price of rent and stuff is pretty much it's pretty much trying to put young people into debt for the rest of their life, and that's what it's all about, pretty much debt and enslavement, I would nearly say, to modern society, to the banks particularly, into the, I suppose the banking order, I'd call it, and to the state and stuff. And again, we should abolish the property tax because the country is in a lot better state, thankfully, than it was in 2008. So there's not much reason why we should still have it because the country's raking in money. Obviously, Irish people don't see the money. The money just goes into a black hole and disappears. But still, at the end of the day, I don't think it's right to charge people who already own the property tax. I still don't, even if it's 200 or so. And again, this was supposed to be a temporary measure. The government emphasised at the time that it was only a temporary measure and that would be got rid of in a few years. And a few years is long gone. 2013 or so. They probably said it'd be around 2018 or so we get rid of the property tax. But as we know in Cavan alone here, take for example, our councillors, our great councillors, a lot of them, high up jobs, big loads of salaries, voted to increase the property tax, voted overwhelmingly to increase it. None of them, I would like to ask any of the councillors in Cavan County Council, did any of them take a pay cut? Because again, they all suggest about taking, increasing this and increasing that tax and increasing the other, but none of them put their hands in their pocket and say, I'm willing to take a €2,000 pay cut in solidarity, because we all hear the word about solidarity. With solidarity with this, solidarity with that, but no solidarity when it comes to you putting their hands in their pocket, because they will willingly give up €2,000 of their paycheck every year if they want to, or more. Yeah, they can give up all of it if they wish. A lot of them don't really need it, to be totally honest. But what I'm trying to say is, it is theft. Like, property tax is theft. Like, let's be fair. Like, you already own the property, but the government says you must pay this to own your property, or you have no right to own your property, even though you paid off the bank loan or whatever, maybe credit union loan, whatever it is. What I'm trying to say, it is theft. And again, we see this nowadays, and just looking at home ownership, just there recently stats came out from the 90s and even the 80s, take for example, there was over 33 or 34% of young people my age, 18 to 34 or so, were able to own their own property back years ago, back when the country, when literally there was no money needed in the country. People still could afford to buy their own property, and that's insane to me, really, in a way. It was difficult, don't get me wrong, but it was achievable. Take for example, the average wage, take for example, it was in the 90s, it was about give or take 18,000 for an only standard worker, pretty much. Now it's a lot higher, supposedly, of course. But take for example, the property would only be less than 100,000. Like, take for example, a lot of properties were only 70, 80,000, and now in modern Ireland it's 300,000 for a small house. Far from the days, and obviously nearly the wages people are getting now is nearly less than what they were getting years ago. Because money lasted years ago. What you paid for, you get. Nowadays, money just goes like fucking nothing. Excuse my language. But it is all just a scam, if you ask me. It's all just a scam for the banks. It's all a scam for the government. It's just for their back pocket. And we see, again, I wouldn't mind if people were paying the property tax in good faith. But what I'm trying to say with that statement is that the government want to take people's private property away from them. As they were saying about the Ukrainians, when they wanted to house Ukrainians and stuff, they were going to take people's property, confiscate it, for the common good. That was their argument. We do it for the common good. But who's the common good and what does that achieve? Nobody ever explained that, but thankfully they didn't do it because obviously they know there'll be huge resistance to that, as they should. But again, there should be huge resistance to this property tax still being in place. And again, a lot of these councils, just to say, even just not even referencing Calvin for a second, a lot of them should take pay cuts, to in solidarity with the people who can't afford, who are paying property tax, even though they shouldn't probably be paying it because they were told that it would only be a temporary measure. But a temporary measure, a good few years after a temporary measure now. But I'm trying to say it is theft. Like, regardless of what anybody says, in my opinion, it is theft. Like, if you paid off a bank loan or if you worked all your life to pay off a house, and then the government has the gall, or your local town, to come around and say, oh, you owe us 300 every year for your property that you already paid tax in. Like, again, when you buy your house and stuff, there's tax and obviously added on to that. So you already paid your tax, but you're paying more tax for the government. It doesn't make any sense. It just, pretty much, that's trying to, as I say, the stats show themselves that nobody's buying their own house. Nobody my age can ever afford to buy a house. It's not even feasible. Like, just even saying, it's only about the whole added population between 18 to 35 in this country with home ownership is atrocious. As I say, it was 34, 35 in the 80s and 90s, give or take. Nowadays, it's barely 7%, barely 70%. We're a long way past that. But when we say property tax is theft. Simple as. Thank you.